There's no deficiency. Throughout the year, throughout his life. It's not like we think there was something missing before. But even with that, we see he could say he took it to another level once Ramadan had started. And then, as I said, it was not a steady state. That it became even more intense once the last 10 days had started. And like I had mentioned, again, had the talks during the week after Salat al-Tarawih, or during the Salat al-Tarawih, that one of the hadith that is mentioned that Aisha radiallahu anha noted about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She said that إذا دخلت العشر إذا دخلت العشر, when the last 10 days entered, then أحيا الليلة, then he would again stay up at night, throughout the night. He would be awake at night. وشد المنزر, that he would tighten his belt. And that's, we could say, you could take that as metaphorically as meaning that he would strive even harder. He would work hard. And not only that, وَأَيْقَظَ أَهْلَهُ, and he would awaken his family at night. Right? So we know that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam was already striving hard, yet he was noted, it was observed that he would strive even harder in the last 10 days, and not only it would be for himself, but he would make sure that he would wake his family. And we know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to not just encourage his family, but the entire community. He used to encourage them as well, used to exhort them to have increased effort in these last 10 days. Right? Like when he said to, for example, when he said to look for Laylatul Qadr, to look for Laylatul Qadr in the last, in these last days. When he said, تحروا ليلة القدر في العشر الأواخر من رمضان, in the last, look for Laylatul Qadr in the last 10 days of Ramadan, or in other riwayat, some slight differences. For example, تحروا ليلة القدر في الوتر من العشر الأواخر من رمضان, that in the odd, look for Laylatul Qadr in the odd nights of the last 10 days of Ramadan. So, if we think about that, what does that mean? I mean, he's telling the companions, and that instruction applies to us as well, to look for the Laylatul Qadr in the last 10 days. And that, of course, is by spending the nights in worship, spending the nights in qiyam, in the dhikr of Allah, the recitation of the Quran. That's how we would look for the last 10 days, and making dua. Right? Because it's not like a physical search that we can do. We can't go and, look for the night. But when he's saying tahadhar Laylatul Qadr, it means you look for it by preparing for it in your actions. So we see a clear progression there, right? That not only was he striving hard during the month, but then in the last 10 days, he would increase his striving. So there are some, lessons we can take from that. Of course, it's one thing just to say, okay, we need to work harder. We understand, we do need to do that. But in a practical sense, we can look at our own actions during the month. Did we have, if we look at how we started and how we are now. Before Ramadan to when Ramadan starts, of course, you can notice the change. Right? We start fasting every day. We started doing the Salatul Tarawih, the Qiyam. Right? That was in terms of our actions, that is something that we were maybe not doing before. But then now, as the month goes on, we see, have we, increased our worship? For example, is it easier for us to spend more time in prayer? In terms of our recitation of the Quran, from when the month first started until now, are we able to recite more? Is it less of a struggle for us to, sometimes if somebody is not used to doing something, then what happens? When he first starts doing it, like an exercise, right? When you first start working out, in the beginning it's tough. Then you slowly build yourself up. But just speaking as an example of exercise, if you notice, let's say somebody is trying to, whether it may be strength training or some type of cardio exercise, he wants to see a progression. Right? If it just flattens off, then after a while you're thinking maybe something's wrong. Maybe he's not working himself hard enough to get that progression. And even worse, if you notice like a decline, then you're thinking, hey, maybe something's wrong in this person's workout plan. So we can, with that in mind, we can think, if we look at ourselves, have we increased what we are doing? And it's not that what we do is going to be, we can't always think we're going to do exactly what we see that the Sahaba did. That you can't just get to that point right away, but at least you see that progression. I mean, on some practical points, that we know that majority of us will be able to come and pray the Salat al-Tarawih, right? We do it with the Imam, and then there's still opportunity for prayer after that. Even if we have work, we have school, so we think, okay, we can't stay up all night every night. But still, what happens? Let's say if you're fasting, you're gonna be awake for the suhoor, right? You're gonna wake up before Salatul Fajr begins, and what is that time? That is the time also for Salatul Tahajjud. Now, at that time, eating and drinking, prior to fasting, that takes priority. That's what the Prophet ﷺ did, and he instructed others to do as well. But if we have maybe wake up 5 minutes earlier than what we are, then if you pray even 2 rak'ah at that time, then that act may be, it might not seem like much to us, but it may be something very valuable, and it's something that could be accepted by Allah Ta'ala if we make that little effort, right? Just something we can add on. And I mentioned before about the recitation of the Quran. Like, are we trying to regularly recite it every day? How much are we reciting? Did we start by reading a page every day, half a juz every day, 1 juz every day? Can we increase that? Right? It's something we can see in ourselves. Are we able to maintain and increase it as the month is going on? And then also, another act that is so encouraged during this month, of course, is giving charity. So it is a time that throughout Ramadan that giving charity is emphasized, because it says as it says in the hadith also, that the charity during Ramadan is the best of charity. Like at one time the Prophet ﷺ was asked, فَأَيُّ الصَّدَقَةِ أَفْضَلُ, that which charity, which sadaqah is the best? And he ﷺ responded by saying, الصَّدَقَةُ فِي رَمَضَانِ, the sadaqah in Ramadan is the best of charity. So, but again, sometimes if we just think about that aspect of giving charity, in general, the deeds that we do, it's not the greatness of our deeds that makes them somehow special. Like we think, oh, I stood, even if somebody, let's say I spent the whole night in prayer. I mean, that act in itself, it's not that Allah Ta'ala is, in need of our, just like He's not in need just of our refraining from eating and drinking during the day. It's not like we're going to say, oh, now we did enough to please Allah Ta'ala. No matter what we do, it's insignificant compared to what to Allah Ta'ala's due. Right? It doesn't matter how much you pray. It doesn't matter how much Quran you recite. It doesn't matter how much ibadah that you do. We can't ever say that it's enough. That's why even the Prophet ﷺ, as he said, said that all people, even himself, who enter Jannah is due to Allah's mercy. Right? So we shouldn't be deluded into thinking that if we do a certain thing, then we're set. If we pray if we do the whole qiyam with the imam, then we're set. We can relax the rest of the time. We could take it easy. If we just recite this much Quran, okay, then we can be satisfied. So it's not like we ever can think that we did enough, or it's not the action that's important. It's our intention, our sincerity, our wanting to do it for Allah Ta'ala. But there's another way to look at that too. That same concept. And that is that we don't know. We cannot say which deed is going to be accepted by Allah Ta'ala and which deed is going to be valued and magnified in its reward by Allah. That's not for us to decide. So think about that with charity, right? It may seem difficult that, okay, you're supposed to increase the amount of charity that we're supposed to give. Maybe for some people, they've already been giving it throughout the month. They have a certain amount that they can give based on their income, based on their expenses, that they try to reduce those expenses already and give charity throughout the month. So a person might think, oh, you know what, just some number. Obviously, the numbers differ from, person to person. Let's say somebody thinks, okay, I gave $1,000 today. So, I'm set then for the rest of the month. I already gave my, looking at my, looking at the budget, it looks like I already met that mark, so I should be set. But no, we shouldn't think that, because, what it could be. Let's say there's an opportunity. There's many opportunities we could see, either whether it's like hearing about them online or in person, right? That something comes up, like you could help feed somebody, you could help some project, help some establish some masjid, help some school, etc. So many opportunities. Even if you already thought you spent what you had planned on spending. Let's say you give $1, right? Somebody gives $1, especially during these last 10 days. Right? So what did the Prophet ﷺ say about this charity in Ramadan? That it's the afdal. That it's the afdal of sadaqah, the best of sadaqah. So that you have to think there's a certain magnification. The reward can increase manyfold more than what we can comprehend. So in a practical sense, just for us to think what we can still do in these last 10 days, aside from increasing our prayer, our recitation of the Quran, or other ibadat, with charity, don't think that, that opportunity is not there. Even if it's giving like a penny. You don't know how much that penny is going to be worth, in the akhirah. Right? That opportunity is always there. So it's kind of like, how they say when somebody's investing in something, so one strategy is to diversify, right? You want to invest only in one type of thing. You want to diversify your investment. So by doing this, we can think we want to diversify, give to any opportunity that's there. Don't think that, okay, I can't give a substantial amount, so I'm not going to give. If somebody just gives a small amount, almost every time, whenever they can, then that will be increasing our chances of having our charity, our deeds magnified while we have this opportunity. Right? So that's another thing, because like it says in the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, he was ajwadun nas, he was always the most generous of people. But on top of that, he would be the most generous in Ramadan. So that's the sunnah that we can follow in anything, that we're not going to, when we say we want to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ during this month, probably we're not, it might even in one prayer, we'd be lucky if we can say that we had something even closer to what the Prophet ﷺ was doing, what the Sahaba were doing. So it's not like we can say that our act is going to be exactly like what they were doing, but it's in our effort, it's in the intention of trying to increase what we are doing during this month, and especially in the last 10 days of Ramadan. Right? And we can also plan for the future this way. Learn from what we have done so far in Ramadan and see how we can, better maximize the opportunities in future Ramadans as well. For example, it says the Prophet ﷺ, he was known during these last 10 days that aside from these other deeds that what he would do, that he was already doing is he would do i'tikaf. كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يعتكف أواخر عشر الأواخر من رمضان. And in many other hadith, it says that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم would do i'tikaf in the last 10 days of Ramadan. So of course that takes some planning also. It's not something that everybody can do. But maybe once in our lifetime we can think, okay, we think ahead, vacation days, etc., whatever you can do to make it line up. Maybe that's something we can also strive for, right? That's something to plan for, to try to better maximize this opportunity. And also I'd mentioned this, that the basic idea is that if we value something, then we're more likely to try to take advantage of that opportunity, if we value that opportunity. Like if there's a sale in a store, it says, okay, it's 50% off, but it's something you have no use for, then, you're probably not going to care. But it's 50% off something that you really need and you're getting every day. Then what happens is there might be a big line outside the store. You go online, it's going to be sold out within a matter of seconds sometimes. Right? Why is that? The same savings might be there. It's not the 50% reduction that's important. It's the need for that item. Right? So, we see that in life as well. Like I given this example, like you see this also in sports, right? Like the people you look at the any season you look at, you have basketball, baseball, right? The games are not always valued the same way. There's a lot of games in the season. There's baseball started. There's 160 games. They could take it easy in the beginning, lose a few games. They don't care. But then you look at, okay, let's say there's less games in the season. You take when football comes, for those who might be familiar with that, right? Less games, 16 games, or at least there were not 17 games, right? So if somebody loses 10 games in a row in a football season, that'll be different than losing 10 games in a row in baseball or basketball, right? Why? Because they're the limited number of games, right? When something is limited, when you lose that, then the loss is bigger, right? And when things get more important, like now we see, playoffs are starting. So what happens during the regular season? People take it easy. Maybe again, for those who follow, that there's the star player, maybe they're sitting out certain games or relaxing. Then playoff starts. What happens? Nobody's sitting out games anymore. But another problem, keeping that in mind also, you can see some parallels there. If somebody's not working hard at all during the year, they're taking it a little bit too easy during the regular season. Then the playoffs come, then they start working full strength. What happens? People get injured sometimes. The athletes, if they're not in good condition, they get injured. Then they can't even participate anymore. Doesn't matter if it's playoffs or whatever. So in the same way, even if you value something, we value these last 10 days of Ramadan. But if we don't see that progression, we haven't been training ourselves throughout the month and even in the year before to prepare for Ramadan. That's why we had all those talks about that, about preparing for Ramadan. Why? It's a progression. You can't go from zero effort to 10 effort in overnight. Except with the tawfiq of Allah Ta'ala. But we can't expect that. So, the same approach that people take to things like that, let's say to sports, you should get some lessons from that. When you see how things are, people are performing in life, and whether it's in sports or in business or in job, we think when something is so valued and they put so much effort into it and they have a certain approach, that we could ask ourselves for something that's far more valuable, like it is for us. These months of Ramadan, are we even applying those same lessons? So, if you look at what happens in sports, like somebody loses, okay, they lose a game, it's over. They lose in the playoffs, their season's over. But for us, the loss, because if somebody takes a loss in Ramadan, it's far more of a loss, right? That if a person, like it says in the hadith, if a person does not get forgiven in Ramadan, he goes through Ramadan, and yet aside from all of the opportunities there, he does not have his sins forgiven. What did the Prophet ﷺ say about that person? رغم أنف رجل دخل عليه رمضان ثم انسلخ قبل أن يغفر له. That may he be humiliated, right? May he be humiliated, the person upon whom Ramadan came, and then it left before he was forgiven. And in another hadith that when the angel Jibreel came to the Prophet ﷺ, he told him, the angel said, Man adraka shahr Ramadan wa lam yughfar lahu, that whoever saw the month of Ramadan, whoever caught the month of Ramadan, and yet he was not forgiven, فَدَخَلَ النَّارِ, then he will enter the fire. And not only will he enter the fire, فَأَبَدَهُ اللَّهُ, then Allah will cast him far away. And he said to the Prophet ﷺ, قُلْ آمين, فَقُلْتُ آمين. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Ameen to this. So talk about a loser, that's the loss. Losing, like if you lose anything in life, in sports, somebody, even if they lose a championship game, they lose a Super Bowl, it doesn't compare, to that type of loss. So for us, that's why we want to make sure that we at least do what we can, put that effort in, that sincere effort, to increase what we are at least trying to do to take advantage of these opportunities that are even amplified in the last 10 days of Ramadan. So I make dua that Allah accepts our efforts and gives us the tawfiq to increase our efforts and have them accepted as we try to follow the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, just as before we continue, just briefly, just want to mention also that we hear the reminder every week that as far as giving charity, and I mentioned now as well. So any charity that we have the opportunity for, we should try to take advantage of. But that includes also, we can see giving to works like this center here. If we give anything, it's not. We can't say what Allah Ta'ala is going to accept. We shouldn't think we don't have the money, but we should take advantage of these, especially in these last 10 days, to give whatever we can to support those efforts. So anything that we can give, we should try to give. And finally, before we proceed with the salah, I'll just mention a few of the words in Arabic. I have a khutbah in Arabic. الحمد لله استعين واستغفر ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون أياما معدودات. وقد جاء في الحديث عن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا دخل العشر أحيا الليل وشد المنزر وأيقظ أهله. وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام إذا سئل عن الصدقة أي الصدقة أفضل، قال عليه الصلاة والسلام الصدقة في رمضان، أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله أستعين واستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة. من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد ومن يعصهما فإنه لا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر الله شيئا. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وصل على المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات وبارك على محمد وأزواجه وذريته. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أرحم أمتي بأمة أبو بكر وأشدهم في أمر الله عمر وأصدقهم حياء عثمان وأقضاهم علي وفاطمة سيدة نساء أهل الجنة، والحسن والحسين سيدا شباب أهل الجنة، والحسن وحمزة أسد الله وأسد رسوله. اللهم اغفر للعباس وولده مغفرة ظاهرة وباطنة لا تغادر ذنبا. الله في أصحابي لا تتخذوهم غرضا من بعضي، فمن أحبهم فبحبي أحبهم، ومن أبغضهم فببغضي أبغضهم. وخير أمتي قرني، ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم أعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم تقبل منا صيامنا وقيامنا وقراءتنا في شهر رمضان. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. فاذكروني يذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون وأقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح، قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله.
So صفوفكم straighten your lines, fill in the gaps. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أفحسبتم أنما خلقناكم عبثا وأنكم إلينا لا ترجعون فتعالى الله الملك الحق لا إله إلا هو رب العرش الكريم. ومن يدعو مع الله إلها آخر لا برهان له به فإنما حسابه عند ربه إنه لا يفلح الكافرون. وقل رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. إنا
أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Just keep in mind, it's the last 10 days of Ramadan, as you all know, and we have our campaign for fusion to sustainability. Last 10 days, if you guys can go to the website, fmccnj.com, and donate small amounts every day if you can for the last 10 days. It will be very helpful for us to continue the programs like the summer school, the evening school, the Sunday school for the kids. There's a lot of activity going on. We're teaching the kids Quran and Salah, as well as the seniors programs and the sisters program. Jazakallah khair.